The first insult came before she even touched the body. Elara Voss stood in the marble foyer of the Moretti family funeral home, her hands folded in front of her, her black dress simple and professional, her posture calm. She had been summoned to the private viewing room on the third floor, a space reserved for the city's most powerful families, the ones who paid for silence as much as for services. The Morettis were not just powerful, they were dangerous. Everyone in Chicago knew that. And Elara, a mortuary cosmetologist with 12 years of experience and a reputation for meticulous work, had been specifically requested by the family's attorney. She had not asked why. She never did. Her job was to prepare the dead for their final farewell, to restore dignity to faces ravaged by time, illness, or violence, to make grief slightly more bearable for those left behind. She was good at it. She was invisible in it, and she preferred it that way. But invisibility had its price. A woman in a severe black suit, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor, stopped in front of Elara and looked her up and down with undisguised contempt. The woman was thin, elegant, her dark hair pulled back so tightly it stretched the skin at her temples. She wore a diamond brooch shaped like a serpent, and her lips were painted the color of dried blood. This was Celia Moretti, the sister of the deceased, or so the file said. The deceased was Allegra Moretti, wife of the family boss, Niccolo Moretti. She had died in a car accident 3 days earlier. Her body burned beyond recognition. The casket closed for the memorial. Elara's task was to prepare what remained, to make the body presentable for a private family viewing before the public service. It was delicate work. It was sacred work. And Celia Moretti looked at Elara as though she were a stain on the floor. "So you're the one they sent," Celia said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I expected someone more appropriate." Elara did not flinch. She had heard variations of this her entire life. She was curvy, full-figured, soft in a world that worshipped sharp edges and hollow cheeks. Her body was substantial, powerful, lush, but to women like Celia Moretti, it was a moral failing, a lack of discipline, a reason for disgust. Elara had stopped apologizing for her body years ago, but the wounds still ached when prodded. She kept her voice steady. "I'm Elara Voss. I was told the family requested a specialist in restorative cosmetology. I have 12 years of experience and—" "I don't need your resume," Celia interrupted. "I need you to do your job and stay out of sight. My brother is devastated. The last thing he needs is to see someone like you hovering around Allegra's body. It's grotesque. Someone like you." The words landed like small, sharp stones. Elara absorbed them, let them settle into the quiet place inside her, where she stored all the cruelties she had endured. She nodded once. "I understand. I'll begin immediately." Celia stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming, something floral and suffocating. "The casket will remain closed. You will not speak to anyone. You will not look at anyone. You will do your work and leave. Do you understand?" "Yes," Elara said. "Good." Celia turned and walked away, her heels echoing in the vast, cold space. Elara exhaled slowly. She had been in this industry long enough to know that grief made people cruel, that families often lashed out at the nearest target, that the mortuary staff absorbed the worst of human pain. But this felt different. This felt like something else entirely. She pushed the thought aside and walked toward the private viewing room, her soft-soled shoes silent on the marble. The room was dimly lit, heavy with the scent of lilies and candle wax. The casket was closed, a dark mahogany box polished to a mirror shine, surrounded by white flowers and framed photographs of a beautiful woman with dark hair and a radiant smile. Allegra Moretti, the boss's wife. The woman everyone said was the heart of the Moretti family, the one who softened Nicolo's edges, the one who made him human. Now she was gone, and the family was unraveling. Elara had read the news reports. The car accident had been brutal, the vehicle consumed by fire, the body identified only by dental records and a wedding ring. The ring had been returned to Niccolo Moretti, a private keepsake for a private grief. Elara's job was to prepare the body for the family's final goodbye, to make sure that when they looked upon what remained of Allegra, they saw peace instead of horror. She set down her case and opened it, revealing the tools of her trade: brushes, pigments, waxes, adhesives, fine needles, silk threads. She had rebuilt faces before, restored features destroyed by trauma, given families the gift of recognition. It was not morbid to her. It was an act of love. She believed that the dead deserved dignity, that every body told a story, that the final image a family carried with them mattered. She had learned this from her grandmother, a woman who had prepared bodies in a small village in Eastern Europe, who had taught Elara that death was not an ending, but a transition, and that those who tended the dead were keepers of memory. Elara put on her gloves and approached the casket. She lifted the lid slowly, reverently, and looked inside. The body was wrapped in white silk, the fabric covering most of the form, leaving only the face and hands exposed. The damage was extensive. The fire had done its work cruelly, and the face was barely recognizable as human. But Elara had seen worse. She had reconstructed soldiers, accident victims, bodies recovered from water. She began her assessment, her eyes moving over the features with clinical precision, cataloging what could be restored and what would need to be rebuilt. The bone structure was intact. The hands were relatively preserved. The wedding ring was missing, of course, returned to the husband. But there was another ring. Elara paused. On the right hand, on the ring finger, was a thin gold band. It was simple, almost invisible against the damaged skin, but it was unmistakably a wedding ring. Elara frowned. The file said Allegra Moretti was right-handed. Her wedding ring should have been on her left hand. That was the custom in the Moretti family, according to the photographs she had studied. In every image, Allegra wore her ring on her left hand, but this ring was on the right. And it was not the ring from the photographs. The ring in the photographs was platinum, with a large diamond. This ring was gold, thin, worn smooth by years of wear. It was a different ring entirely. Elara's heart began to beat faster. She looked at the face again, at what remained of the features. The dental records had confirmed the identity. The family had accepted the identification. The body had been released to the funeral home with all the proper documentation. But something was wrong. Elara had a gift, one she rarely spoke about, one that had made her exceptional at her work. She remembered details. Every face she had ever restored, every body she had prepared, every grieving family she had comforted. She remembered them all with photographic precision, and she remembered Allegra Moretti's face from the photographs. The bone structure was similar, yes, but the hands were wrong. Allegra Moretti had long, slender fingers, the hands of a pianist, according to the society pages. The hands in the casket were shorter, the fingers slightly thicker, the nails a different shape. And the ring. The ring was on the wrong hand. Elara stepped back from the casket, her mind racing. She had two choices. She could ignore what she had seen, do her job, collect her fee, and leave. That was what Celia Moretti wanted. That was what the family expected. That was what was safe. Or she could ask questions. She could raise the alarm. She could risk everything. Her career, her safety, her life, to honor the truth. Because if the body in the casket was not Allegra Moretti, then who was she? And where was the real Allegra? Elara closed the casket lid gently. her hands trembling. She needed more information. She needed to see the personal effects. She needed to talk to someone who had been there when the body was found. But she was a mortuary cosmetologist, a woman who was supposed to be invisible, a woman who had been told to stay out of sight. No one would listen to her. No one would believe her, except, perhaps, one person. She left the viewing room and walked through the funeral home, her mind still spinning. The building was a labyrinth of marble corridors and hushed rooms, each one designed to contain grief and keep it from spilling into the world. She passed the family's private lounge, where she could hear muffled voices, the low murmur of conspiracy. She passed the chapel, where the public memorial would be held in 2 days. She passed the office of the funeral director, a man named Harold Crane, who had been paid handsomely to accommodate the Moretti family's every demand. And then she stepped outside, into the cold Chicago evening, and walked toward the cemetery. The cemetery was old, sprawling, filled with towering oaks and weathered headstones. It was attached to the funeral home, a seamless transition from grief to earth. And it was here that Allegra Moretti would be buried, in the family mausoleum, beside generations of Morettis, who had ruled Chicago's underworld with iron fists and whispered threats. Alara walked along the gravel paths, her breath misting in the cold air, her mind still fixed on the ring. She needed to think. She needed to clear her head, and she needed to find the groundskeeper. His name was Silas. He was an old man, grizzled and weathered, with hands like tree roots and eyes that had seen too much. He had worked at the cemetery for 40 years, and he knew every grave, every secret, every body that had been laid to rest in the cold earth. Alara had met him years ago, when she first started working at the funeral home, and they had developed a quiet friendship. 2 people who lived on the edges of death, who understood its rhythms and its silences. Silas was the only person she could trust, and she had a feeling he knew something about the Moretti family. She found him near the old mausoleum, raking leaves into a pile, his movements slow and deliberate. He looked up as she approached, his eyes narrowing with concern. "Alara," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have," she said. "Silas, I need to ask you something. About the Moretti family." Silas stopped raking. His face, already lined with age, seemed to deepen with shadow. "The Morettis are not a family you ask questions about," he said quietly. "They're a family you avoid." "I know," Alara said, "but I think something is wrong. I think the body in the casket isn't Allegra Moretti." Silas stared at her for a long moment. Then he set down his rake and gestured for her to follow him. He led her to a small shed near the back of the cemetery, a cluttered space filled with tools and old records and the smell of damp earth. He closed the door behind them and turned to face her. "Tell me everything," he said. Alara told him. She told him about the ring on the wrong hand, about the hands that didn't match the photographs, about the feeling in her gut that something was deeply, terribly wrong. Silas listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with every word. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he spoke. "3 years ago," he said, "I saw something. It was late at night, after a funeral. The Morettis had buried one of their own, a cousin, I think. The service was over. The family had left, and I was doing my final rounds. But I saw a car pull up near the mausoleum. A black car, no lights. 2 men got out. They were carrying a body." Alara's blood ran cold. "A body. A woman," Silas said. "She was wrapped in a sheet. I couldn't see her face, but I saw her hand. It was wearing a ring, a thin gold band. They buried her in an unmarked grave, near the old oak tree. No ceremony, no marker, no record. I told myself it was none of my business. The Morettis are dangerous people, but I never forgot it. Alara's heart was pounding now. Can you show me where? Silas hesitated. If I show you, you can't unsee it. And if the Morettis find out you know, they'll bury you too. I have to know, Alara said. If that body in the casket isn't Allegra, then someone is lying. Someone in the family. And if Allegra is still alive, she deserves to be found. Silas looked at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with something that might have been respect. Then he nodded. Follow me. He led her through the cemetery, past the manicured lawns and the marble angels, to a remote corner, near a massive oak tree. The ground here was uneven, covered with wild grass and fallen leaves. There was no marker, no sign that anyone had ever been buried here. But Silas pointed to a slight depression in the earth, a place where the ground had settled over time. There, he said, that's where they put her. Alara stared at the unmarked grave, her mind reeling. A woman had been buried here in secret, a woman with a thin gold wedding ring. And now another woman was lying in Allegra Moretti's casket, wearing a ring on the wrong hand. The pieces were beginning to fit together, and the picture they formed was terrifying. Someone in the Moretti family had faked Allegra's death. Someone had killed another woman to take her place, and someone was trying to cover it up. I need to go to the police, Alara said. Silas shook his head. The police won't help you. The Morettis own half the department. You go to the police, you'll be dead before morning. Then what do I do? You go to the one person who might listen, Silas said. Niccolo Moretti. Alara stared at him. The boss? He's the one who identified the body. He's the one who believes his wife is dead. Exactly, Silas said. If someone in his family is lying to him, he deserves to know. And if his wife is still alive, he's the only one who can find her. But you have to be careful. You can't just walk up to him and accuse his family of murder. You need proof. You need the ring. Alara thought about the ring on the wrong hand, the thin gold band that didn't belong to Allegra Moretti. It was still on the body, still in the casket, still waiting for her to return and finish her work. She could take it. She could photograph it. She could present it to Niccolo Moretti as evidence. But if she was caught, she would be killed. The Morettis did not tolerate betrayal, and taking evidence from a family member's body would be seen as the ultimate betrayal. But Alara had spent her life being invisible, being dismissed, being told she was not enough. She had absorbed cruelty and swallowed pain, and kept her head down. And for what? To be safe? To be comfortable? To be forgotten? No. She had not become a mortuary cosmetologist to be safe. She had become one to honor the dead, and the woman in that unmarked grave deserved to be honored. The woman in the casket, whoever she was, deserved to be honored. And Allegra Moretti, if she was still alive, deserved to be found. I'll do it, Alara said. I'll get the ring. Silas put a hand on her shoulder. Be careful, Alara. The Morettis are not just dangerous. They're family. And family protects its own, even when they're wrong. Alara nodded. She understood the risk, but she also understood something else. She understood that the truth was a weapon, and she was about to wield it. She returned to the funeral home as the sun was setting, the sky bleeding red and gold over the Chicago skyline. The building was quieter now, the family having retreated to their private rooms, the staff reduced to a skeleton crew. Alara walked through the marble corridors, her footsteps silent, her heart pounding. She reached the private viewing room and paused outside the door. She could hear voices inside. She pressed her ear to the wood and listened. The cosmetologist was asking questions, a voice said. It was Celia Moretti. She was looking at the body too closely. I don't trust her. She's nobody, another voice said. A man's voice, deep and cold. A fat mortician who doesn't know her place. She'll do her job and leave. If she causes trouble, we'll handle her. Niccolo is already suspicious, Celia said. He's been asking about the accident, about the dental records. He's not stupid. He's grieving, the man said. Grief makes people blind. By the time he starts seeing clearly, it will be too late. The body will be buried, and Allegra will be forgotten. Alara's blood ran cold. They were talking about murder. They were talking about covering up a crime. And they were talking about her as though she were nothing. A fat mortician who didn't know her place. The words stung, but they also fueled her. She had been called worse. She had survived worse. And she was not going to let them win. She waited until the voices faded, until the door opened, and Celia Moretti and the man walked out. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face like carved stone, and eyes like chips of ice. He was dressed in a black suit, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Alara recognized him from the photographs in the funeral home's file. His name was Dante Moretti, Niccolo's younger brother. He was the underboss, the second in command, the man who handled the family's dirtiest business, and he was clearly involved in whatever was happening. Alara pressed herself into the shadows, holding her breath until they passed. Then she slipped into the viewing room and closed the door behind her. The casket was still there, still closed, still waiting. She approached it slowly, her hands trembling. She lifted the lid and looked at the body, at the damaged face and the wrong hands and the thin gold ring. She reached down and gently, reverently, removed the ring from the woman's finger. It was warm, as though it still held the heat of life. She slipped it into her pocket and closed the casket lid. She had the evidence. Now she needed to find Niccolo Moretti. She found him in the family's private lounge, a room filled with leather chairs and dark wood, and the heavy scent of cigars. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city, his back to the door. He was tall, taller than his brother, with broad shoulders and dark hair, touched with gray at the temples. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, and his hands were clasped behind his back. He did not turn when she entered. He did not acknowledge her presence at all. But she could feel his power, his grief, his barely contained rage. It filled the room like a storm about to break. "Mr. Moretti," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "I need to speak with you." He turned slowly, and his eyes met hers. They were dark, almost black, and they held a depth of pain that made her breath catch. He was a man who had lost everything, and he was barely holding himself together. "You're the cosmetologist," he said. His voice was low, rough, like gravel over silk. "My sister said you were finished." "I'm not finished," Alara said. "And I'm not just a cosmetologist. I'm someone who noticed something that doesn't make sense, something about your wife's body." Niccolo's expression did not change, but the air in the room seemed to tighten. "Be very careful what you say next," he said. Alara took a deep breath. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the ring. She held it up, the thin gold band glinting in the dim light. "This ring was on your wife's right hand," she said. "But in every photograph I've seen, Allegra wore her wedding ring on her left hand. And this isn't her ring. Her ring was platinum, with a diamond. This is gold. It's old. It's worn. It belongs to someone else." Niccolo stared at the ring, his face unreadable. Then he looked at Alara, and something shifted in his eyes, something dangerous, something desperate. "You're telling me the body in that casket is not my wife." "I'm telling you the evidence doesn't add up," Alara said. "The hands are wrong. The ring is wrong. And I spoke to the groundskeeper. He saw a woman buried in an unmarked grave 3 years ago. A woman with a gold ring on her finger. I think someone in your family is lying to you. I think your wife might still be alive. The silence that followed was absolute. Niccolo Moretti did not move. He did not speak. He simply looked at her, and Alara felt as though she were standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to fall. Then he took a step toward her, and another, until he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, and see the fine lines around his eyes. "Who else knows about this?" asked. "No one," Alara said. "Just me and the groundskeeper. And now you." "Good," he said. "Keep it that way. If what you're saying is true, someone in my family has committed an unforgivable crime, and I will find out who." He turned away from her and walked to a small table where a decanter of whiskey sat. He poured himself a glass and drank it in one swallow. Then he turned back to her. "You've put yourself in danger by coming to me," he said. "Do you understand that?" "Yes," Alara said. "And you came anyway?" "Yes." "Why?" Alara met his eyes. "Because the dead deserve dignity, and the living deserve the truth. I couldn't walk away knowing what I knew." Niccolo studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, a single sharp movement. "You're braver than most people I know," he said. "And you're smarter than my entire family combined. I need your help. I need you to continue your work, as though nothing has changed. Prepare the body, attend the memorial, and watch. Watch everyone. Tell me who looks guilty. Tell me who looks afraid. Can you do that?" "Yes," Alara said. "Good." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small card. It was black, with a single phone number, embossed in silver. "If you see anything at all, call this number. It's a private line. Only I answer it." Alara took the card. Her fingers brushed his, and a spark of something electric passed between them. She pulled her hand back quickly, her heart racing. "I'll do what I can," she said. "I know you will," Niccolo said. "And Alara?" She looked up at him. "Thank you," he said. The word was simple, but it carried the weight of a man who rarely said it. Alara left the lounge and walked back to the viewing room, her mind still spinning. She had done something reckless. She had done something dangerous. But she had also done something right. And for the first time in years, she felt seen. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation and observation. Alara worked on the body, restoring what she could, making the face peaceful, the hands folded, the appearance dignified. She did not mention the ring. She did not mention her conversation with Niccolo. She simply did her job, her eyes and ears open, her mind cataloging every detail. She watched Celia Moretti, who hovered near the viewing room like a vulture, her eyes sharp and suspicious. She watched Dante Moretti, who came and went with a cold efficiency, his presence a shadow over everything. She watched the other family members, the cousins and the uncles and the business associates, all of them dressed in black, all of them performing grief, with varying degrees of sincerity. And she noticed something else. She noticed that no one cried for Allegra. No one spoke of her with warmth or affection. No one seemed to miss her at all. It was as though she had already been forgotten, a ghost in her own memorial. The night before the public service, Alara was in the viewing room, making final adjustments to the casket, when the door opened and Dante Moretti walked in. He closed the door behind him and locked it. Alara's heart lurched, but she kept her face calm. "Can I help you?" she asked. Dante smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I've been watching you," he said. "You're very good at your job. Too good. You notice things you shouldn't notice." "I don't know what you mean," Alara said. "I think you do." He walked toward her, his footsteps slow and deliberate. "I think you saw the ring. I think you talked to the groundskeeper. and I think you talked to my brother." Ilara's blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about." Dante stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You're a terrible liar," he said. "But it doesn't matter. The memorial is tomorrow. After that, the body will be buried, and this will all be over. You'll go back to your little life, your little job, your little apartment, and you'll forget everything you think you know. Because if you don't, I'll make sure you disappear. Do you understand?" Ilara met his eyes, and for the first time in her life, she did not look away. "I understand," she said. "Good." Dante unlocked the door and walked out, leaving Ilara alone with the body and the silence and the weight of his threat. She waited until his footsteps faded. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed the number on the black card. Niccolo answered on the first ring. "What happened?" "Your brother knows," Ilara said, her voice shaking. "He threatened me. He said I'll disappear if I don't forget what I saw." There was a pause. Then Niccolo's voice came through, cold and hard as steel. "He won't touch you. I'm sending a car for you now. You're not staying at the funeral home tonight, but the memorial." "You'll attend the memorial," Niccolo said, "but you'll attend it with me, and you'll bring the ring." The car arrived 20 minutes later, a black sedan with tinted windows and a driver who did not speak. Ilara climbed into the back seat, her heart still pounding, her mind still racing. The car drove through the dark streets of Chicago, past the glittering towers and the shadowed alleys, until it pulled up in front of a building that looked like a fortress. It was a penthouse, the top floor of a skyscraper that overlooked the city, and it was guarded by men in black suits who nodded at Ilara as she passed. She was led to a private elevator, which carried her up to a world of marble and glass, and cold, elegant luxury. Niccolo was waiting for her in the living room, standing by the window, looking out at the city. He turned when she entered, and his eyes swept over her, taking in her simple black dress, her tired face, her trembling hands. "You're safe now," he said. "No one will hurt you here. Your brother." "My brother will be dealt with," Niccolo said. "But first, I need to know everything. Tell me about the ring. Tell me about the groundskeeper. Tell me about the body." Ilara told him. She told him about the ring on the wrong hand, about the hands that didn't match, about Silas and the secret burial, about Dante's threat. Niccolo listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with every word. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he spoke. "I've suspected something was wrong for months," he said. "Allegra and I were having problems. She wanted to leave me. She said she was afraid of someone in the family. I thought she was being paranoid. I thought she was trying to manipulate me. But now, I think she was telling the truth." "Who was she afraid of?" Ilara asked. "Dante," Niccolo said. "My brother has always been jealous of me. He wanted to be the boss. He wanted Allegra. He wanted everything I had, and I think he tried to take it. What do we do now?" Niccolo turned to her, and his eyes were fierce. "We expose him. At the memorial, in front of everyone. You'll present the ring. You'll tell them what you found, and I'll make sure the truth comes out." Ilara's heart pounded. "They won't believe me. I'm nobody. I'm just the mortuary cosmetologist." "You're not nobody," Niccolo said, and his voice was soft now, almost tender. "You're the woman who noticed what everyone else missed. You're the woman who had the courage to speak up. You're the woman who honored my wife when my own family tried to erase her. You're not nobody, Ilara. You're everything." Ilara felt tears prick her eyes. She had spent her life being invisible, being dismissed, being told she was not enough. And now this man, this dangerous, powerful, grieving man, was looking at her as though she were the most important person in the world. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. And it was also, somehow, the most wonderful thing she had ever felt. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll present the ring." Niccolo nodded. "Good. Now get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." He led her to a guest room, a beautiful space with a large bed and soft lighting, and a view of the city that stretched to the horizon. Ilara lay down on the bed, her body exhausted, her mind still spinning. She thought about the ring, about the body, about the woman in the unmarked grave. She thought about Allegra Moretti, who might still be alive, who might be waiting to be found. And she thought about Niccolo, about the way he had looked at her, about the way he had said her name. She fell asleep with his voice in her ears, and for the first time in years, she did not feel alone. The next morning, Ilara woke to find a dress laid out for her. It was black, like her own dress, but it was made of silk and velvet, tailored to fit her curves perfectly, designed to make her look powerful instead of invisible. There was a note beside it, written in a sharp, masculine hand. "Wear this. You deserve to be seen. N." Ilara put on the dress and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked different. She looked like a woman who mattered. She looked like a woman who was about to change everything. The memorial was held in the funeral home's grand chapel, a vast space filled with flowers and candles and the hushed murmurs of the city's elite. The Moretti family sat in the front row, dressed in black, their faces masks of grief. Celia Moretti was there, her serpent brooch glinting in the candlelight. Dante Moretti was there, his eyes cold and watchful. And Niccolo Moretti was there, standing at the front of the chapel, his face unreadable, his presence commanding the room. Ilara stood in the back, her heart pounding, the ring in her pocket. She waited for her moment. She waited for the signal. The service began. The priest spoke of Allegra's beauty, her kindness, her devotion to her family. The words were hollow, empty, a performance for an audience that did not care. Ilara watched the faces of the Morettis, and she saw what she had seen before. No one was grieving. No one was mourning. They were all waiting for something. They were all waiting for the body to be buried so they could move on. Then, Niccolo stepped forward. He raised his hand, and the priest fell silent. "Before we proceed," Niccolo said, his voice carrying through the chapel, "there is something that needs to be addressed. A question about my wife's death. A question about the body in that casket." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Celia Moretti's face went pale. Dante Moretti's jaw tightened. Niccolo turned and looked directly at Ilara. "Miss Voss," he said, "please come forward." Ilara walked down the aisle, her heels clicking on the marble floor, every eye in the room on her. She could feel the weight of their stares, the judgment, the curiosity, the contempt, but she did not falter. She reached the front of the chapel and stood beside Niccolo, her head held high. "Miss Voss is the mortuary cosmetologist who prepared my wife's body," Niccolo said. "She noticed something that the rest of us missed, something that changes everything. Miss Voss, please, tell them what you found." Ilara took a deep breath. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the ring. She held it up for everyone to see. "This ring was on the body's right hand," she said, her voice clear and steady. "But Allegra Moretti wore her wedding ring on her left hand. And this is not her ring. Her ring was platinum, with a diamond. This is gold. It's old. It's worn. It belongs to someone else." The chapel erupted in whispers. Celia Moretti stood up, her face twisted with fury.
"This is absurd!" she shouted. "She's lying! She's trying to cause trouble!"
"Sit down, Celia," Niccolo said, his voice cold as ice. "Miss Voss is not finished." Ilara continued. "I also noticed that the hands on the body don't match the photographs of Allegra Moretti. Her fingers were longer, more slender. The hands in the casket are different, and I spoke to the groundskeeper of the cemetery. He told me that 3 years ago, he saw 2 men bury a woman in an unmarked grave. A woman with a gold ring on her finger. Dante Moretti stood up now, his face dark with rage. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You're going to believe a fat mortician over your own family?" The word hit Ilara like a slap. Fat mortician. The same words she had heard through the door. The same words that had been used to dismiss her, to erase her, to make her feel like nothing. But she did not flinch. She did not look away. She simply turned to Niccolo and handed him the ring. Niccolo took the ring and looked at it, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at his brother. "Dante," he said, "where is my wife?" Dante's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Niccolo said. "You've been lying to me for months. You faked Allegra's death. You killed another woman to take her place. And you buried the evidence in an unmarked grave. I want to know why." The chapel was silent now, every person holding their breath, waiting for the explosion. Dante looked around the room, at the faces of the family, the business associates, the enemies and the allies. He saw no support. He saw no escape. And then he laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "You want to know why?" he said. "Because Allegra was going to leave you. She was going to take half of everything and disappear, and I couldn't let that happen. I loved her, and she chose you, so I made sure she couldn't choose anyone." "Where is she?" Niccolo demanded, his voice rising. "I don't know," Dante said. "She escaped. The night we staged the accident, she got away. We had to use another woman, a woman who looked enough like her to fool the dental records. We paid off the coroner. We made sure the body was burned beyond recognition, and we thought we had gotten away with it. But then this fat mortician noticed the ring." Niccolo moved faster than Ilara thought possible. He crossed the room and grabbed Dante by the collar, slamming him against the wall. "You will tell me everything," he said, his voice a low growl. "You will tell me where she might have gone. You will tell me who helped you, and then you will pay for what you've done." Dante's face was twisted with fear now, his bravado gone. "She had a sister," he said. "A sister in New York. She might have gone there. I don't know. I swear I don't know." Niccolo released him and stepped back. He turned to his men, who were standing at the back of the chapel. "Take him," he said, "and find my wife." The men moved forward and grabbed Dante, dragging him out of the chapel as he shouted and struggled. Celia Moretti was crying now, her perfect mask shattered. The other family members were whispering, their faces pale with shock, and Ilara stood at the front of the chapel, the ring still in her hand, her heart still pounding. Niccolo turned to her. "You did it," he said. "You exposed him. You brought the truth to light." "I just noticed the ring," Ilara said. "You did the rest." "No," Niccolo said. "You did more than notice. You had the courage to speak up. You risked your life for a woman you never met. You honored the dead by defending the living, and I will never forget that." He reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. "Come with me," he said. "I need to find my wife, and I need you by my side." Ilara looked at him, at this dangerous, powerful, grieving man who had seen her when no one else did. She thought about her life, her quiet, invisible life, and she realized she did not want to go back to it. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to matter. She wanted to be brave. "Okay," she said, "I'll come with you." They left the chapel together, walking through the stunned crowd, out into the cold Chicago morning. The city stretched before them, full of secrets and dangers and possibilities. And Ilara Voss, the curvy mortuary cosmetologist, who had been called creepy and grotesque and fat, walked beside the Mafia boss, her head held high, her heart full of hope. The search for Allegra Moretti took 3 weeks. Niccolo's men scoured New York, following leads, tracking down the sister, piecing together the fragments of a life that had been shattered by betrayal. Ilara stayed by Niccolo's side, not as a servant or a subordinate, but as an equal. She helped him interpret the evidence, remember the details, see the patterns that others missed. She became his confidant, his advisor, his anchor in the storm, and slowly, inevitably, she became something more. It happened on a rainy night in Manhattan, in a hotel suite overlooking Central Park. They had just received word that Allegra had been found, alive but traumatized, hiding in a small apartment in Brooklyn. Niccolo had sent his men to bring her home, and he was waiting, his face a mask of tension and relief. Ilara was sitting beside him, her hand on his arm, her presence steady and calm. "She's alive," Niccolo said, his voice rough with emotion. "After all this time, she's alive." "She is," Ilara said, "and you'll see her soon." Niccolo turned to her, his dark eyes searching her face. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said. "You saved her. You saved me. You saved everything." "You would have found the truth eventually," Ilara said. "Maybe," Niccolo said, "but I wouldn't have found you." He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, despite the power in his fingers. "Ilara," he said, "I've spent my life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Power, money, protection. But you wanted nothing. You just wanted the truth. You just wanted to do what was right. And that makes you the most extraordinary woman I've ever met." Ilara's heart was pounding, her breath catching in her throat. "Niccolo," she whispered. "I know this is complicated," he said. "I know my wife is coming home. I know there are things we need to figure out. But I need you to know something. You are not invisible to me. You are not creepy, or grotesque, or any of the things my family called you. You are beautiful. You are brilliant. You are brave. And I want you in my life. Whatever that looks like, whatever you're willing to give." Ilara felt tears spill down her cheeks. She had spent so long believing she was not enough, that her body was a flaw, that her quiet life was a punishment. But this man, this dangerous, powerful, complicated man, saw her differently. He saw her as she truly was, and that was a gift she had never expected to receive. "I want to be in your life too," she said, "but I need you to know something as well. I'm not going to be your secret. I'm not going to be hidden away. I've spent my whole life being invisible, and I'm done with that. If you want me, you have to want all of me. Publicly, openly, without shame." Niccolo smiled, a rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. "I wouldn't have it any other way," he said. "You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be celebrated. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure everyone knows it." He leaned forward and kissed her, a soft, tender kiss that held the promise of something deeper, and Ilara kissed him back, her heart soaring, her soul finally at peace. The reunion with Allegra was emotional and complicated. She was a shadow of the woman in the photographs, thin and haunted, her eyes filled with the terror of years spent in hiding. She and Niccolo had a long conversation, a private conversation, and when it was over, they emerged with a quiet understanding. Their marriage had been broken long before Dante's betrayal. They would divorce, amicably, and Allegra would start a new life, far from the Moretti family and its dangers. Niccolo would help her, protect her, ensure she was safe. But his heart, he realized, belonged to someone else. Elara returned to Chicago with Niccolo, but she did not return to her old life. She left her job at the funeral home, though she still visited Silas, bringing him gifts and stories and the quiet companionship of two people who understood the weight of secrets. She moved into the penthouse, not as a guest, but as a partner. She wore beautiful clothes that celebrated her curves, attended glamorous events on Niccolo's arm, and faced down the whispers and the stares with a confidence she had never known she possessed. The Moretti family, those who remained loyal, learned to respect her. Those who did not were removed. And Dante Moretti, the man who had tried to destroy everything, was never seen again. But the greatest change was within Elara herself. She no longer saw herself through the eyes of people who had mocked her. She no longer believed she was invisible, or unworthy, or not enough. She was the woman who had noticed the ring. She was the woman who had exposed the lie. She was the woman who had honored the dead by defending the living. And she was the woman who had captured the heart of a mafia boss, not through manipulation or desperation, but through courage and intelligence, and an unshakable commitment to the truth. One evening, 6 months after the memorial, Niccolo took Elara to the cemetery. They walked through the quiet paths, past the marble angels and the weathered headstones, until they reached the old oak tree. The unmarked grave had been exhumed, the woman's body identified, and given a proper burial, her name restored to her. A small plaque now marked the spot, a tribute to the woman who had been used and discarded. Elara knelt beside it and placed a flower on the grass. "We never found out who she was," she said softly. "We found out enough," Niccolo said. "We found out she was a victim, and we gave her justice. That's because of you." Elara stood up and looked at him. "It's because of us," she said. Niccolo took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I have something for you," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it, and inside was a ring. It was platinum, with a large diamond. But it was not Allegra's ring. It was new, designed specifically for Elara, a symbol of a future they would build together. "Elara Voss," Niccolo said, his voice low and intense. "You walked into my life when I was drowning in grief and lies. You gave me the truth. You gave me hope. You gave me a reason to believe in something again. I don't want to spend another day without you by my side. Will you marry me?" Elara looked at the ring, at the man, at the life that stretched before her. She thought about the girl she had been, the woman who had been called creepy and grotesque and fat, the woman who had been told to stay out of sight. And she thought about the woman she had become, the woman who was loved and valued and seen. She smiled, a smile that came from the deepest part of her soul. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will." Niccolo slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, a kiss that was fierce and tender and full of promise. And in the quiet of the cemetery, surrounded by the dead and the living, Elara Voss finally understood what it meant to be truly alive. The story of the Curvy Mortuary cosmetologist and the Mafia boss became legend in Chicago. People whispered about the woman who had noticed the wrong ring, the woman who had exposed the Mafia's darkest lie, the woman who had saved the boss and found love in the process. They called her brave. They called her brilliant. They called her the heart of the Moretti family. And Elara, walking through the city, on Niccolo's arm, her head held high, her curves celebrated, her mind sharp, and her heart full, knew that she had earned every bit of it. She had been invisible once, but she would never be invisible again.